or die. Hey, swing those hips around, can't stop, roll back down. My ladies, short, tall, thin or wide, always down and ready to ride.
The BBC, unforgettable drama at its best.
Comedy, performed with conviction in 20 minutes here on BBC One with Ronnie Barker doing porridge. And that's after the news and sport now with Martin Lewis and David Davis. It's 10 to 9.
Another Conservative backbencher says he'll vote against the government over the pit closures. Mining communities are to be given more government money to help cushion the blow of the closures. And the TUC plans a national protest to try to force the government to reverse its decision. The number of Conservative MPs prepared to say publicly they will vote against the government over the pit closures has now risen to 3. Richard Alexander today joined Elizabeth Peacock and Winston Churchill. A further 6 Conservative backbenchers say they will either vote against or abstain, while 4 more say their decision depends on what happens. Together they could help to overturn the government's 21-seat majority in the Commons. The government today sought to head off the rebellion by promising an extra package of help on top of the £1 billion already pledged. The President of the Board of Trade, Michael Heseltine, will tell the Commons on Monday just how much extra money there will be and how it will be used to help mining communities. In an independent on Sunday survey of 68 Conservative backbenchers, 39 want pit closures stopped until after an inquiry. The Sunday Times contacted 100 Tory backbenchers. 44 said they opposed the closures and job losses.
A demonstration outside the Home Secretary's local Conservative office, a further sign of the public outcry against the pit closures. Kenneth Clarke is the only cabinet minister with a pit in his constituency. The Tory MP for another doomed Nottinghamshire colliery, Bevercoats, is one of those who says only a halt to the closure programme will stop him from voting against the government in Wednesday's Commons vote.
My present intention is to vote against the government's proposals and to vote for what I understand will be the opposition plan, that we should have a moratorium on these closures.
And Tory MPs well away from the coalfields say they're amazed at the depth of public concern at the fate of the miners and think that can't be ignored.
I must take notice of what my constituents tell me. And to a man, they are saying, we don't like what's been said, and therefore perhaps you should consider voting against your own government or at least abstaining.
13 Tory MPs have now said publicly they're thinking of withdrawing their support, enough to defeat the government. But as the aid package to mining areas to be announced on Monday is now being hurriedly increased, the party chairman hopes the Tory rebels will think again.
It seems to be crucial that as far as the Conservative Party is concerned, and as far as Conservative MPs are concerned, that they wait to see what Michael Heseltine has to say in his statement on Monday. I think that the important thing is to take a step or two back, wait to see what the Secretary of State announces in his package.
Michael Heseltine has now obtained additional money on top of the up to £1 billion announced on Tuesday. But if it comes to a government defeat next week, some Tory MPs are saying Mr Heseltine will be under pressure to resign. The Chancellor, Norman Lamont, is the latest cabinet minister to have told colleagues he didn't know of the scale or timing of the closures. Labour's shadow cabinet were out getting support for a national petition to save mining jobs, and Labour hope public anxiety will have an effect on Conservative MPs.
What we're saying is that public have got 4 days in which to get that anger and to get that view across to their MPs. And I want everyone who shares our view that this closure programme will be deeply damaging to let their MP know that they want that MP on Wednesday to vote to save the pits.
The government seems to have sparked off a wave of public sympathy not seen for a couple of decades, and there are increasing signs it could face a damaging defeat in the Commons on Wednesday.
TUC leaders have launched a national campaign for a freeze on pit closures, but have made it plain that they don't want anyone to go on strike. There'll be a lobby of Parliament and a week tomorrow, a mass demonstration in London. The TUC also wants a meeting with the Prime Minister to discuss the future of the coal industry and the wider state of the economy.
The calls for industrial action by left-wing demonstrators outside the TUC this morning fell on deaf ears. Union leaders have no intention of flouting the law, and the NUM itself has put a strike ballot on the back burner, focusing instead on the human cost of pit closures.
Quite frankly, there are men and women in the mining industry and in other industries are being threatened as a result of government policies, and that can't be acceptable. We're requesting that our members should have the right to work.
Union leaders want to tap the groundswell of public support for the miners and channel it through marches and rallies into a demonstration against the recession itself. They've asked for a meeting with the Prime Minister, calling for a freeze on pit closures.
We do live in a democracy, and on this issue, Parliament will have the last word. I believe that we have hope. We have, therefore, the opportunity to persuade members of Parliament to say, on this one, the government is wrong, badly wrong.
For the TUC, this isn't just a fight for miners' jobs. They want to give it a much wider political perspective, with the pit closures being seen as a symbol of mass unemployment and Britain's industrial decline. The unions say that's what the crisis in the mines is all about.
This is going to be a coalition for recovery. The catalyst is the announcement about the pit closures, which really have to go on hold while a better policy is thought out.
For once, Arthur Scargill finds himself part of a united TUC, which believes ministers can be forced to think again, not just about closing 31 pits, but the whole direction of the government's economic policy.
Miners' supporters have been holding a rally in Chesterfield this evening. Up to 2,000 people gathered in the town's main square to hear speakers, including their local MPs and NUM leader Arthur Scargill, calling for the pit closures programme to be reversed. A group of miners' wives linking arms headed what was billed as the start of the People's Campaign. The march, organised by the Chesterfield Labour Party, came on the back of a day-long conference of left-wing activists. But the organisers appealed to anyone opposed to the pit closures to join the protest. Under the closure programme, all coal mining will end in North Derbyshire. But local NUM officials believe that a huge popular protest can save the majority of pits. It was predominantly a rally of the left, but a spokesman for a group of conservative businessmen briefly joined the platform speakers to add his voice to the protest. He explained his reasons for being there.
To echo the root grass feelings of Conservatives at their abhorrence of what is going off at the moment. You have our support.
Lastly, Arthur Scargill, fresh from the TUC meeting, receiving the kind of acclaim he hadn't received since 1984.
Colleagues, this is a fight not only for the mining industry, it's a fight for the British people, and even more important, it's a fight for human dignity.
Speakers urged protesters to lobby Parliament on Wednesday in tens of thousands.
Fears for the future at the doomed Silver Hill Colliery in Nottinghamshire. As these miners shared their concern, their leader, Roy Link, prepared for the third night of a sit-in more than 1,000 feet below ground. He's calling on every home in the country to turn off its lights at 9 o'clock tomorrow night in protest. By telephone from the bottom of the mine shaft, he gave his response to the government's announcement of more cash.
In a way, that's putting a plaster on a wound. The whole problem wants looking at it. Throwing money away just to get through a temporary crisis isn't the answer. Let's have a look at the crisis and eliminate it.
The men here say they'll defy the closure plan and carry on working.
Our idea is to go down there and show people that we can get coal out of this pit and not just sit back and let it die. We want the pit to survive, and we're going to try and keep it going.
There were calls for action too at Trentham in Staffordshire, as in every community on the hit list. There's hope that the growing wave of protest will force a government climb down. but behind the fighting talk, a feeling of helplessness. Today, a requiem for the coal industry from the Grimethorpe Colliery Band. It took first prize at the National Championships in London. Scant comfort for a band which may soon cease to exist when the pit itself is no more.
The loyalist terrorist group, the Ulster Volunteer Force, have said they shot dead a Sinn Féin activist, Sheena Campbell, in a hotel bar in Belfast last night. 2 other people were injured.
Sheena Campbell was killed because the UVF claimed she was an IRA activist. She died when a gunman walked into this hotel lounge and shot her at almost point-blank range. A man and a woman sitting nearby were wounded in the attack. It's clear the gunman had been watching her movements. She was studying for a law degree at the nearby Queen's University. Sheena Campbell had not hidden the fact that she was active in the Republican movement. In 1990, she was a candidate in a Westminster by-election. Sinn Féin President Gerry Adams helped her campaign. Tonight, a party spokesman denied she was involved in the IRA. He said she'd been killed because she'd had the courage to voice her views. Meanwhile, at lunchtime today, the security forces were called to a bookmaker's shop in Belfast, where 2 men had been shot as they placed their bets. However, they weren't seriously hurt, and a short time later, 2 men were arrested.
Thousands of supporters of the mainly Zulu Inkatha Freedom Party defied a police ban today by marching to the centre of Johannesburg carrying spears, axes and clubs. The African National Congress said it was disgraceful that the police had not disarmed the crowd.
A sight and a sound designed to intimidate. Thousands of Zulus marched through South Africa's biggest city to protest against a law banning the carrying of dangerous weapons in public. Zulus, they warned, would never surrender their spears and their axes, their so-called cultural weapons. But now, at a time of bitter, violent confrontation with the ANC, wasn't this provocative?
What about the killing of our people every day? Why do you in the media ignore the mowing down of our people even yesterday, even day yesterday, even day before that? I mean, is that not more serious than just the carrying of cultural weapons?
The Zulus insisted this was a cultural affair, not a political march. And in the event, the police simply watched as leaders of the Zulu-based Inkatha Freedom Party petitioned against the weapons ban, against plans for a security clampdown at Zulu hostels in the townships, and against the government and ANC negotiating political reform without their consent.
These Zulus call it defiance in the name of justice. Their opponents, not least the ANC, call it outright provocation. Either way, they have left the rest of South Africa in no doubt that political reform, which is at their expense, will be resisted, if necessary, by force. John Harrison, BBC News, Johannesburg.
The Dutch Aviation Authority's chief investigator has suggested that metal fatigue may have contributed to the crash of the El Al cargo jet in Amsterdam 2 weeks ago. He says there are similarities between the Amsterdam crash and one in Taiwan last year. Reports say there was no engine fire in either plane, leaving metal fatigue as a likely cause.
When the El Al captain reported trouble shortly after takeoff, he said there was fire in the number 3 starboard inboard engine. But that engine, one of the pair which fell off the wing moments before the crash, has now been recovered, and investigators say there was no fire and no breakup. But if there wasn't an engine fire, why was the crew misled into thinking there was? And what caused the engines to detach from the wing? Dutch crash investigators now suspect metal fatigue. They think this may have caused both the El Al disaster and the remarkably similar loss of a China Airlines jumbo freighter which crashed in Taiwan last December. That points to metal fatigue, possibly caused by unknown stresses on the engine mountings. Acute vibration may have sheared the retaining bolts, shaken the engines loose, and triggered the engine fire alarms in the cockpit. The Dutch Civil Aviation Authority wants Boeing to check the engine mountings of jumbo jets, but they're only talking about the 747-200F, the freighter. That's about 70 aircraft worldwide. It's a type which is no longer built. They're not talking about passenger versions of the jumbo jet, which still has a fine safety record.
Statesmen from more than 30 countries have attended the state funeral of the former West German Chancellor Willy Brandt in Berlin. Speaking at the ceremony in the Reichstag Parliament building, the German president said Willy Brandt had eased Cold War tensions and restored Germany's standing in the world.
Willy Brandt was, of course, a man of peace.
but the nation's farewell to him included a salute from the German armed forces, the first time they'd been seen in strength outside the Reichstag since the 1930s. Tributes were paid to the former Chancellor's role in building a new and European Germany. Among the guests of honor, Mr. Gorbachev, allowed out of Moscow for the occasion by the present Russian authorities, and the Prince of Wales representing Britain. The speakers included the present German Chancellor. Willy Brandt saw it as his task to build bridges across the wall and barbed wire to our eastern neighbors. He helped make possible what had been only a dream. Willy Brandt's last journey with full honors was from the Reichstag to the burial ground on the edge of Berlin. The procession moved slowly through the streets of the city where he had first come to prominence as mayor when the wall was built. He was buried privately in the city which he had loved and served for so long. Martin Bell, BBC News, Berlin.
And now, with news of today's sport, here's David Davis.
Norwich City have overtaken Blackburn Rovers at the top of the English Premier League. Blackburn didn't play today, and Norwich's Chris Sutton got the decisive goal in his side's narrow victory over Queen's Park Rangers. Coventry's Peter Undlove scored at Goodison Park, where Everton were held to a draw, and Arsenal's Alan Smith produced the only goal of the game against the bottom club Nottingham Forest. And so at the top of the table, Norwich are now 2 points clear, but they've played that one more game than Blackburn, who meet Aston Villa on Monday. In Scotland, Ali McCoist came on as a late substitute to get the winner against Hibernian. Rangers still lead the Premier League by 5 points. All their nearest rivals also won today. England's rugby union team began their international season today with a 26-13 win over Canada. What was unusual was the venue, Wembley Stadium.
With Twickenham out of action due to building work, England trod new ground for their first full international against Canada. And with the visitors starting well, England took time to find their feet. It was 20 minutes before Ian Hunter burrowed his way through to England's first points. The pressure on Canada then increased, and a few minutes later, Jeremy Guscott took to the air for England's second try. But Canada refused to lie down, and in the second half, their slippery scrum half, John Graf, evaded English hands to make the score 21-13. For a while, England looked concerned, but the match was effectively settled 5 minutes from time, with smooth handling leading to Ian Hunter's second score. England had won, but not at a stroll.
And South Africa proved they're a major rugby union force by beating France in their first international away from home for 11 years. Tries by Dani Herber and James Small took the Springboks to a 20-15 win. The second test is in Paris next Saturday. Scotland and England are through to tomorrow's semi-finals of golf's Dunhill Cup, despite losing their final group matches at St Andrews. Scotland, who were beaten by Sweden, now play Australia. England owe their semi-final place to Italy's sudden death playoff victory over Japan. Silvia Grappiosone birdied the first extra hole to deny Japan the chance of reaching the semi-finals. It means that England go through to meet the United States tomorrow, despite their defeat by Spain. Jose Maria Olazabal guided them to a 2-1 victory. Lester Piggott secured another important victory today, riding the 2,000 guineas winner Rodrigo de Triano. He won the Dubai Champion Stakes at Newmarket. Piggott timed his run perfectly, hitting the front inside the final furlong. Peter Bromley is the commentator.
On the far side, Leicester's got it in the bag. Rodrigo de Triano gets his nose in front. 25 yards to go. It's Rodrigo de Triano by a neck. Lougheed is only second, a for third.
Well, in under an hour's time, Frank Bruno will climb into the ring at Wembley Arena for the most important test of his comeback. He faces South Africa's Pierre Coetzee, and victory would put him in line for another world title fight.
As ever, Frank Bruno was larger than life, but at this morning's weigh-in, he was also bigger physically than he's ever been in his fighting career. At 17 stone 6, he'll enjoy a 2-stone advantage over his opponent, the South African Pierre Coetzee.
Frank, 17 stone 6, you are getting a big lad.
Yeah, very big, Harry. That's what my wife said when I first met her, you know, actually.
Did you reckon that you were going to come in as heavy as that when you started training?
George wanted me to come in around that, about 17.5, you know, that's what he always sees. Pleases punch.
Joking apart, Coetzee is by far the most dangerous opponent Bruno has faced on a comeback campaign that's been more of a stroll back so far. Dutchman John Emmen hit the canvas inside the first 3 minutes of a farcical encounter, and Jose Ribalta was dispatched in the second round. But Kurtzer will be far more durable and unlikely to be intimidated by Bruno's fanatical supporters. Tonight for Bruno is crucial. Defeat would mean retirement, victory a genuine chance of a third world title shot.
And you can see the fight live on a Match of the Day special on BBC One starting at 20 to 10. That's the BBC News Tonight. From David and me, good night.
The shockwaves crisscross the nation. More than half the pits in Britain to close, 30,000 miners facing the sack. Public outrage has the government on the rack more beleaguered than ever. With his own party in open revolt, Michael Heseltine, the man who ordered the closures, goes on the record to answer the charge that his decision is brutal, incompetent, and must be reversed. That's Michael Heseltine on the record, tomorrow at 1 o'clock on BBC One.
Hello, the weather over the next couple of days will continue on the cold side. We've another cold front coming down from the north. It's producing some fairly heavy bursts of showery rain, especially down through the Irish Sea and into northwestern England. There could even be the odd rumble of thunder, some sleet or snow, especially over the hills, and the showers extend from northeastern Scotland down to the southwest. By the end of the night, the bulk of the showers should be down to the southwest, some snow over the hills of Wales and perhaps even down into the Midlands. In the clear skies over central southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, perhaps one or two mist patches, and perhaps the odd mist patch too down over the southeast, where there may be a touch of frost before some thicker cloud arrives, and a fairly sharp frost for some central and eastern parts of Scotland, temperatures down to -2 with some icy patches on the roads. Tomorrow's weather chart, low pressure up to the northeast, the weather front becoming very slow moving down to the southwest, so we'll find a fair number of showers or longer spells of rain down here, and they'll gradually become more widespread, spreading across southern parts of England during the day. For the north, it's a brighter picture, some of the best of the sunshine in the northeast, but winter showers in many of the hills over Scotland and even Northern Ireland. A fairly cold day, top temperature only likely to be around 11 or 12, and even when we go into Monday, it's still cold, northerly winds, sunshine and showers. That's it. Good night.
Continuing the War and Peace season on BBC Two shortly, preparations begin for a wartime Christmas in the third part of the award-winning drama starring Cheryl Campbell as Vera Brittain in A Testament of Youth.
Tonight, Match of the Day brings you all the best Premier League action, plus this. Bruno's back. Frank Bruno versus Pierre Coutzer, live on BBC One. Ringside seats, uninterrupted coverage. Match of the Day special, tonight, 9:40.
And a spot of sparring puts parole in jeopardy for jailbird Lenny, facing further detention at Her Majesty's pleasure.
Non-Stanley Fletcher, you have pleaded guilty to the charges brought by this court, and it is now my duty to pass sentence.